Alveda King is the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. As a young woman, she was the victim of 2 coerced abortions. Today, Alveda has emerged as a pro-life voice within the African American community. And she's carrying on the legacy of her uncle by fighting for the rights of all people, including unborn babies. Even before birth, the issue of abortion was central to Alveda. Her mother became pregnant while in college and was faced with a life-changing decision.
Mom was pregnant, and the school that she went to was a girls' school, and even if you were married or not married, you could not be pregnant. So she said to her mother, "I don't want to have a baby." And Mom says, Mama Bessie says, "Let's go talk to our pastor, Martin Luther King Sr." And so when they talked to Daddy King, he said, "You know, you can't abort that child. That's a girl. She's not a lump of flesh. I saw her in a dream." And so when you hear me say I have a dream, it's in my genes. Granddaddy saved me from abortion in 1950. I was born in 1951 on January 22nd. In the next several years, of course, the civil rights movement unfolded. Martin Luther King Jr. joined with Rosa Parks, who would not give up her seat on the bus in Alabama. And we fought for civil rights, for people not to be oppressed based on skin color, for people we would call Negroes then. And that went on, of course, until the death of Martin Luther King Jr. in 1968. During those years, my father's home was bombed in Alabama, Reverend A.D. King. And so Martin's home was bombed in Montgomery. And Daddy went to jail, Martin went to jail, I went to jail during the movement. And so as we were marching for the freedom of people based upon skin color, the underlying current was there for the little babies in the womb.
Numerous tragedies have affected the King family, but instead of giving in to hate because of them, Alveda directs all her energies toward promoting a message of truth and love in the pro-life movement.
My dear father was killed the year after Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. Of course, my uncle, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., was shot, and the world knew about that, and it was an absolute outrage, and people were devastated. Dad's death was a little more quiet, but as the brother of the giant, we like to compare Martin and A.D., my dad, to President Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy. And so when President Kennedy was killed, the forces of evil wanted to eradicate the whole Kennedy legacy, and so they killed Bobby Kennedy. And that's what happened with my dad, A.D. He was found in the swimming pool at our home with no water in his lungs, and yet it was called accidental drowning. And the instant response team, the men who pulled him out of the water, said, "There's no water in his lungs. He was dead when he hit the water." And so that is what we had to face. It was definitely a tragedy. My grandmother, Alberta, was shot at Ebenezer Baptist Church a few years later, and she died. But through love and faith, we've never been angry or bitter. The one time I tried to get angry, and I remember my daddy saying to me, "No, we have to love our enemies." Another time I remembered I wanted to be angry at my grandfather, Martin Luther King Sr., when my grandmother was killed. No, I have to love the man who shot my wife. He went to visit him and minister to him in jail. And Mama King used to have a sign in her house, and it said, "Love your enemies. It'll drive them crazy." So the love of God that Martin Luther King Jr. taught about was a predominant theme, love and faith in our family.
Alveda has become a prominent speaker regarding the issues of eugenics. This is the practice of eliminating the offspring of certain undesirable segments of the population. The issue of black genocide is clearly tied to a woman named Margaret Sanger. Sanger was a proponent of eugenics and founded the American Birth Control League as a means of furthering her agenda. Sanger's legacy continued when the American Birth Control League later became Planned Parenthood. Tell me a little bit about the history of Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood.
I was so shocked when I began to find the whole history of Planned Parenthood and how it's connected to genocide and eugenics. When I heard that there was a woman named Margaret Sanger who founded an organization called the Birth Control League that became Planned Parenthood, when I found out that my mother had one of her brochures in 1950 and considered abortion, I began to look at more of what Margaret Sanger was doing. And so the genocide and eugenics movement said that there's a class of people who are better than everyone else, and we kind of need to get rid of any other useless eaters. And the main ones we need to get rid of is the Negroes. She said that they're feeble-minded. Pretty much they called Negroes during her day useless eaters. And so the plan of the eugenics movement, you know what happened with Hitler and all of that. Margaret Sanger is linked to Hitler's regime. It is rumored that she even dated one of Hitler's lieutenants. And so she studied that movement, and she felt that the Negroes in America during her time were useless people, and that they're feeble-minded, they add nothing to society. But you know, she said that Negroes are like weeds and they need to be exterminated. But we don't want the word to get out that we want to eliminate them. So let's pick some of their own leaders who are well-spoken and that people will listen to and convince them of our agenda. So Margaret Sanger, working in that birth control league in Planned Parenthood, working with other eugenicists and population control forces, including corporate leaders, she was working to eradicate what was then the Negro community. Tragically, her legacy has continued into the 21st century. And even today, Planned Parenthood, which Margaret Sanger founded, is pretty much primarily, those clinics are located in black neighborhoods. And they're offering what they call free or very low-cost services. But those services include the murder of babies and things that are harmful to women. At the same time that blacks were being liberated and allowed to ride on the back of the bus, is it a coincidence that a place was being prepared for us down at Planned Parenthood? They put their clinics in minority neighborhoods, predominantly so. In the state of Georgia, for instance, all 17 abortion clinics are in black neighborhoods.
Really?
I've been across America, and many of the Planned Parenthood centers are either on Martin Luther King Avenue or Martin Luther King Drive or nearby. So they target the minority communities. They're doing that in the Hispanic communities as well. And then they say, come on in. We're going to offer you free, safe abortion. I say, well, if it's so free and it's so safe, why do you say you start an abortion at $350, $400, but that the price goes up due to complications? If it's so safe, why are there complications?
Do you think the average African American understands how they're being targeted by the abortion industry?
Until very recently, and when I say very recently, in the last few years, when African American leaders have come together across America and we've started a campaign. We started with a campaign called Defund Planned Parenthood. We work with Students for Life. And in working with Students for Life, or a young lady named Lila Rose, to inform the communities across America about abortion and genocide, we would run into African American communities. And the more that we've done it over the last few years, the eyes are opening, and people in the African American community go, this couldn't be true. There haven't been 14, 15 million black abortions in America since 1973. And when they find out that it's true, they're shocked. And then when they believe it, it becomes, what can we do? And we say, inform, educate, activate your community, tell more people the truth, in love, not in anger. Be angry and sin not, but just tell the truth.
You've brought the issue of black genocide through abortion to the attention of the NAACP. What was their reaction to that?
Over the years, the NAACP once even said that abortion was wrong. That was, of course, in the 50s and the 60s. And now the NAACP supports the agenda of Planned Parenthood. Now, that is just on the national level. I have marched with leaders of local and state NAACP branches, and many of them are pro-life. In Georgia, for example, every year a resolution is introduced to try to reduce and stop abortion out of the Georgia NAACP, but national shoots it down every time. The NAACP and other entities, including elected members of Congress, elected members of state legislators, and etc., are heavily lobbied by organizations such as NARAL or Planned Parenthood, pro-death entities that have pro-death agendas. They'll take a grant or a donation from abortion providers under the guise of family planning, Planned Parenthood, and as they take that money, they're still promoting that agenda of death. And thanks for the healing power of the Lord. In 1950, my mom conceived me, and she had a brochure from a place called the Birth Control League. and it said, if you're pregnant and don't want to have a baby, come and see us. Of course, we know they became Planned Parenthood. My mother's mother, because Mom wanted to go to college, and the school she was going to, you could be married or not married, you couldn't be pregnant. They went to see their pastor, Dr. Martin Luther King Sr. He said, Naomi, sit down, let me tell you something. That's not a lump of flesh. That's my granddaughter. I saw her in a dream 3 years ago. And you have to realize there was no ultrasound back there, and that's why I'm here able to talk to you today. That became a family secret that my mother wanted to have an abortion, and she kept that secret till just a few years ago when she told it to Father Pavone and Janet Morana, and then me. But over the next few years, it just wasn't talked about. I got married the year after my uncle, Martin Luther King Jr., was assassinated. And my daddy walked me down the aisle, Reverend A.D. King, and then 1 week later, he was killed and thrown in our swimming pool. But out of that tragedy, I had gotten pregnant on my honeymoon, and there was a beautiful little boy that was born from that. My doctor, I did not know it, was an abortion doctor as well as an OBGYN. So he birthed that baby, and I went for my 6 weeks checkup. Everything was fine. I went back for a 3 months checkup, and I said, well, doctor, I don't understand. You've got to remember I was young then, and I didn't know about a woman's body, and it wasn't so much talked about. He says, well, you don't need another baby. Let's see. Let's do a menstrual extraction. And that was a DNC locally in his office on a cold table with no knowledge. He didn't ask me. He just did it. Years later, I would go to Rachel's Vineyard and write a forgiveness letter to him, asking him to forgive me for hating him for what he had done to me. That same day that he did that procedure, and I remember it hurt, and I tried to sit up and get off the table. He says, no, hush, be quiet. And nurse hold her down, and when she gets through, send her to Planned Parenthood. They'll help her. So for the next few years, this was 1970, I was post-abortive, didn't know it, had nobody to explain it to me, but I was sad, began to have problems with my weight. There was problems in my breast and mammary system and my cervix and all of this, a whole lot of things that he did on that table, along with taking the life of my baby. So I was going to Planned Parenthood in 1973. A bill called Roe versus Wade passed on January 22nd, and we're here now to get all that corrected. That's my birthday. Today is my birthday. All right. And so January 22nd, and I actually don't really celebrate my birthday. I do this. This is celebrating my birthday, being here with you. So that's how I celebrate my birthday, by the way. I've been doing it since 1970. But they said, well, we've got a safe procedure, and it won't hurt as bad as having a tooth pulled. That's a big lie. Of course, it hurts a lot worse, and the repercussions and the results last a lot longer. And so I remember again, as all our friends are telling you, my sister's here, the cold table, it was very sterile, sound of a vacuum cleaner, I remember that. And I left there, and supposedly everything was supposed to be okay now. And I went on, I ran for office, I won, I became an actress. I just started doing all these things, but deep down inside of me, I wasn't me. And mid-70s, I remember getting pregnant again, had marital problems, health problems, emotional problems, but the world didn't know it. And so I was pregnant. I went to a man named Martin Luther King Sr. He never told me he saved me from abortion, but I said, you know what, Granddaddy, I'm going to have an abortion. He says, they're lying to you. That's not a lump of flesh. That's my great-grandchild. The baby's daddy was a medical student, and I said, I'm a liberated woman. A woman has a right to choose. I see some signs out there, keep abortion legal, all this stuff. I'm saying this stuff, and I'm hurting all along inside. And the doctor, the baby's daddy, medical student, he said, that baby has 46 chromosomes, 23 from you and 23 from me. I want mine back alive. Wow. And I heard him, so they both kept saying baby. The men, young men, said, that's my seed. That's my promise. No. And so that baby was allowed to live. And the sad thing even about that, sisters, though, when I saw the ultrasound of that baby, he was younger than the 2 aborted babies and the one who had been miscarried because of the damage from the abortions. And so all of this pain was there, and all of this, but because of a Christian man, Martin Luther King Sr., who was on a rescue mission, because of a medical student, and then in 1983, I got born again.